Chosen one, someone who lives right next door to your soulmates has confessed to the police. God says, "My child, listen carefully because something hidden has finally entered the light." You have felt a strange weight around your soulmate lately. Their silence seemed deeper than distance. Their eyes carried questions they could not explain. Yet I was already working near them. Someone living beside their home noticed what others ignored. That person watched unusual moments unfold through walls, windows, and quiet nights. Now they have spoken to the police. Do not let fear control you. This confession may not mean what your anxious heart first imagines. It carries a truth about your soulmate's hidden struggle. It also reveals why their behavior changed so suddenly. Stay calm before me. The full truth has not appeared yet. My beloved child, there was a night when rain covered their street. Every house looked dark except one small upstairs window. Your soulmate stood behind that glass with trembling hands. Their phone screen showed your name. They typed a message, erased it, and tried again. Nothing was sent. Across the narrow yard, their neighbor noticed the light staying on. That neighbor had seen the same pattern for several nights. Soft footsteps crossed the floor after midnight. A door opened, then closed. A car arrived without headlights. Your soulmate looked frightened, but not because of you. They were carrying a burden they believed they must face alone. The neighbor remembered every detail. What they later told the police began with that glowing window. My child, do not build conclusions from shadows. Pray instead of worrying. Your soulmate was not hiding another love from you. They were hiding pressure that had grown around their life. Someone had been visiting them with demands. The words spoken outside their door were low and sharp. Your soulmate kept refusing something they knew was wrong. They wanted to protect you from being pulled into the conflict. That choice created distance. It also created misunderstanding. You thought their silence meant rejection. They thought their silence would keep you safe. Both hearts suffered. Neither heart knew what the other was carrying. Yet the person next door heard enough to understand that your soulmate needed help. You who are listening, place your hand over your heart. If this message speaks gently to your spirit, comment Amen. Let that word become a prayer for peace rather than panic. I am not showing you this moment to frighten you. I am reminding you that hidden pressure cannot remain hidden forever. The neighbor did not rush toward the police. At first, they questioned what they heard. They wondered whether it was only an argument. Then they saw your soulmate sitting alone on the front steps before sunrise. Their shoulders shook beneath a thin jacket. Their face was buried in their hands. Beside them rested an unopened Bible. The neighbor stepped outside, but your soulmate quickly wiped their tears. They whispered, "I am fine." Yet the truth was already breaking through. My child, your soulmate had been praying for a way out. Their prayers were not polished. Some were only broken breaths. One evening they opened that Bible without knowing where to begin. A small photograph of you slipped from between the pages. They held it beneath the warm lamp. Their eyes filled with regret. They remembered the last conversation between you. They remembered how cold their voice sounded. What you heard as indifference was fear wearing a mask. They wanted to tell you everything. They stopped because they believed the danger would follow their words. That night they prayed, "God, protect them from what I cannot control." The neighbor heard only part of that prayer. Still, it changed everything. The next morning, the same unfamiliar car returned. Its tires rolled slowly over the wet street. The driver remained inside. Your soulmate stood behind the curtain, barely breathing. The neighbor watched from their kitchen. A coffee cup cooled beside the sink. Minutes passed. Then a folded envelope appeared beneath your soulmate's door. No one knocked. No one spoke. Your soulmate picked it up and froze. The neighbor saw their hand begin to shake. That was the moment uncertainty became concern. They wrote down the car's details. They saved the time. They kept the information hidden, waiting for one final sign. That sign came sooner than anyone expected. My beloved child, I was not absent during those silent hours. I was placing witnesses where your soulmate felt unseen. I was giving courage to someone who normally avoided conflict. I was also softening your soulmate's heart. They had spent too long believing strength meant silence. But true strength sometimes asks for help. The number 777 appeared on a police incident receipt later that day. Do not treat the number as a promise of magic. Let it simply remind you that hope can rise inside ordinary details. Grace often enters quietly. Your soulmate's fear was beginning to loosen, but one painful confession still stood between them and freedom. That evening, church bells carried across the neighborhood. Your soulmate sat at the dining table with the envelope unopened. A soft worship song played from their phone. They reached toward the paper, then pulled back. Finally, they whispered your name. Not because you caused the problem. Because your memory gave them courage. They remembered how you once told them that truth should never fear daylight. Those words returned with unexpected force. Their eyes moved toward the window. The neighbor stood outside speaking with a police officer. For 1 second, your soulmate believed they had been betrayed. Then the officer raised an open hand and spoke gently. Nothing was forced. No accusation was made. The neighbor had reported only what they had witnessed. My child, the confession was careful and clear. The neighbor described the late visits. They mentioned the threatening tone outside the door. They shared the car information and the envelope. They also confessed something personal. Weeks earlier, they had ignored a cry for help because they feared becoming involved. That guilt had kept them awake. When they saw your soulmate's tears, they could no longer remain silent. Their confession was not meant to destroy your soulmate. It was meant to protect them. Yet one detail shocked the officer. The neighbor had heard your name spoken during one of those visits. Not with anger. Not with blame. Your name was used as pressure against your soulmate. You who are listening, understand this with peace. Someone knew your soulmate cared deeply about you. They believed that love could be used to control them. Your soulmate stepped away because they refused to let you become a target. The separation was painful, but it was not empty. It forced them to face fear they had hidden for years. It also showed them that love cannot survive through secrecy forever. They must learn honesty. You must learn patience without losing wisdom. I have been healing both hearts in different rooms. Share this message with someone who needs hope today. Remind them that silence does not always mean absence. My child, the officer asked your soulmate one simple question. Do you feel safe telling us what happened? Your soulmate looked toward the small photograph near the Bible. Their lips trembled. The room became still. Then they answered, I am ready to tell the truth. Those words opened a door that fear had kept locked. But before they could explain everything, the officer placed the folded envelope on the table. A name was written across the back. Your soulmate recognized it immediately. Their face changed. The neighbor stepped closer. The rain stopped outside. And when your soulmate finally revealed whose name it was, even the officer understood why your name had been pulled into this hidden matter. My child, listen carefully. The name written on the back of that envelope was not yours. It belonged to the person who had been quietly pressuring your soulmate for many weeks. The officer looked at your soulmate with patience instead of suspicion. No harsh words filled the room. Only silence. The kind of silence that comes before truth finally breathes. Your soulmate closed their eyes and whispered, I am tired of living in fear. Those words carried more weight than anyone expected. The neighbor lowered their head, realizing they had been watching a wounded soul instead of a guilty one. Even before another question was asked, the atmosphere began to change. Hope had entered a place where fear once ruled. My beloved child, you wondered why your soulmate suddenly became distant. You replayed old conversations in your mind. You questioned every unanswered message. You searched for mistakes that were never yours. Yet while your heart was searching for reasons, your soulmate was searching for courage. Every evening they sat beside a small wooden table. An open Bible rested before them. Their hands shook as they prayed for wisdom. They asked me to protect you even if it meant carrying the burden alone. They believed silence was the safest gift they could offer. They never imagined that silence would become another source of pain for both of you. The officer gently unfolded the envelope. Inside were several pages filled with threats and demands. Nothing about the pages spoke of love. Every sentence was written to create fear. Every line tried to convince your soulmate that speaking the truth would only bring greater trouble. Yet hidden between those cold words was one sentence that caught everyone's attention. It mentioned the person your soulmate loved most. The officer immediately understood why your soulmate had remained quiet for so long. This had never been about protecting themselves. They had been trying to protect another heart. My child, fear often tells people that they must suffer alone. My truth says otherwise. I never created my children to carry impossible burdens without help. Your soulmate slowly realized this. As the conversation continued, they no longer looked at the floor. They lifted their eyes. Their breathing became steadier. Their voice became stronger. Healing rarely arrives all at once. It begins with one honest sentence. Then another. Soon the walls that once seemed impossible begin to fall. The neighbor quietly admitted another truth. Several days before speaking with the police, they had found your soulmate sitting outside just before sunrise. The street was empty. Cool wind moved through the trees. Your soulmate was holding a photograph close to their heart. They whispered your name with tears that no one was supposed to see. They were not asking to be rescued. They were asking that your future would remain untouched by their troubles. That prayer stayed with the neighbor every single day. It became the reason they finally chose to speak. You who are listening, never believe that love is measured only by words. Sometimes love is revealed through sacrifice. Sometimes it appears through painful silence. That silence must eventually end, but it does not erase the love that existed beneath it. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that truth. They are no longer trying to carry every burden alone. They are learning that trust grows when honesty replaces fear. That lesson is changing them more deeply than they expected. As the officer gathered the statements, another small detail came into the light. The dates written inside the envelope matched the very weeks when your soulmate had slowly disappeared from your daily life. Nothing happened by accident. Every unanswered call, every delayed reply, every moment that confused you now carried a different meaning. The pieces were beginning to fit together. Your questions were finally finding answers, yet one important truth had still not been spoken aloud. My beloved child, I have been working where your eyes could not see. While you believed everything was falling apart, I was preparing the right people to stand beside your soulmate. The neighbor found courage. The officer showed compassion. Your soulmate found honesty. None of these changes happened overnight. They grew quietly, just as a seed grows beneath the soil before anyone sees the first green leaf. Trust my timing. I have never stopped working, even during the moments that felt painfully silent. Before the conversation ended, the officer asked one final question. When all of this is over, what is the first thing you want to do? Your soulmate did not answer immediately. They looked through the window as golden morning light slowly covered the street. A peaceful smile appeared through their tears. Then they whispered one simple sentence. If God gives me another chance, I want to tell them everything I was too afraid to say. Those words were never written inside the official report. They remained only in the hearts of those who heard them. Yet they became the beginning of a different future. A future built on truth instead of fear. And before your soulmate could take the next step toward that future, one unexpected piece of evidence arrived that neither the neighbor nor the police had ever seen before. My child, listen carefully. The evidence did not arrive with loud voices or flashing lights. It came inside a small, worn notebook that had been hidden beneath a loose floorboard in your soulmate's bedroom. The officer only discovered it because your soulmate quietly said, "There is something I never wanted anyone to find." Their hands trembled as they pointed toward the corner of the room. Dust covered the wooden floor. Morning light slipped through the curtains. The neighbor stood silently in the doorway, praying under their breath that whatever was inside would finally bring peace instead of more fear. When the notebook was opened, every page revealed dates, conversations, and private prayers. It was not a record of revenge. It was the testimony of a heart that had been trying to stay faithful while living under constant pressure. My beloved child, each page carried the same pattern. Your name appeared often. Not because you were involved in the trouble, but because you were the reason your soulmate refused to surrender. One entry read, "If I tell them everything now, they may become part of this pain. Lord, please keep them safe until I can stand without fear." Tears rolled down your soulmate's face as those words were read aloud. The officer lowered the notebook for a moment. Even the neighbor's eyes filled with compassion. They finally understood that the silence had never been about a lack of love. It had been born from a desperate desire to protect someone precious. The officer continued reading. Another page described sleepless nights filled with prayer. Your soulmate had written about sitting beside an open Bible while listening to soft worship music. They admitted feeling weak. They admitted feeling afraid. Yet every entry ended the same way. God, help me choose truth over fear. Those simple words carried more strength than anyone expected. They revealed a heart that had not abandoned faith, even while walking through confusion. I was with them during every lonely night. I heard every whispered prayer before another human ear ever did. My child, the neighbor suddenly remembered something they had never shared before. A week before calling the police, they had seen your soulmate standing outside just after sunset. The sky was painted with gentle shades of gold and blue. A small wooden cross rested in your soulmate's hand. They looked toward the heavens and quietly said, "If I lose everything except your presence, I still have enough." At the time, the neighbor thought those words were only part of a private prayer. Now they realized those words explained the courage growing inside your soulmate long before anyone noticed it. The room became completely still. No one rushed the conversation. No one interrupted the silence. Healing often begins in moments where words become unnecessary. Your soulmate closed the notebook and looked at the officer. "I don't want to hide anymore," they said. Their voice was steady this time. Fear had not disappeared completely, but it no longer controlled every decision. That was the beginning of freedom. Real freedom always starts with honesty. You who are listening, there are moments when waiting feels unbearable. You ask why answers take so long. You wonder whether I have forgotten your prayers. Yet I am often preparing hearts before I change circumstances. If I had brought this truth into the light too early, your soulmate would not have been ready to speak. The neighbor would not have been ready to testify. Even the officer would not have understood the full picture. My timing is never careless. It is filled with wisdom that becomes clear only when you look back. As the notebook was placed inside an evidence bag, one folded piece of paper slipped onto the table. It had been hidden between two pages. Your soulmate immediately reached for it. Their breathing grew heavy. The paper had never been meant for anyone else's eyes. "That is a letter," they whispered. "I wrote it months ago." The officer gently asked whether they wished to keep it private. Your soulmate looked toward the window where sunlight now filled the room. After a long pause, they answered, "No. I think it is finally time." My beloved child, the letter was never sent because fear convinced your soulmate there would never be a safe moment. Every line spoke with honesty. They admitted their mistakes. They confessed the distance they had created. They described the burden they had carried in silence. Most of all, they wrote about you. They thanked me for bringing your life across theirs. They prayed that even if you never understood the reason for their silence, you would always know you were deeply loved. Those words had remained trapped inside folded paper for far too long. Now they were finally breathing. The neighbor quietly stepped outside to give everyone privacy. Gentle wind moved through the trees. Church bells echoed in the distance. The officer finished reading the letter and carefully folded it again. "This changes everything," they said softly. "Not because it erased the past, but because it revealed the truth hidden beneath every misunderstanding." Your soulmate lowered their head and whispered a prayer of gratitude. They no longer felt completely alone. They knew that grace had entered the room before they even realized it. "My child, I have watched every tear that both of you have cried. None of them have been wasted. I have been healing wounds that neither of you knew how to describe. Trust me a little longer. The truth has begun to rise, but another unexpected witness is about to step forward. This person carries one final piece that explains why the neighbor chose to speak at exactly the right time, and why your soulmate believes your lives were being guided long before either of you understood my purpose. My child, listen carefully. The unexpected witness did not arrive wearing a uniform or carrying authority. They came quietly with folded hands and gentle eyes. It was an elderly woman who lived across the street from your soulmate for many years. She entered the station slowly, holding a small cloth bag close to her heart. The officers recognized her because she rarely spoke unless something truly mattered. She looked toward your soulmate with kindness, then softly said, "I believe it is finally time to tell what I have seen." The room fell silent once again. No one interrupted her. Even your soulmate seemed surprised that she had come. My beloved child, this woman had watched your soulmate grow through seasons of joy and seasons of hidden sorrow. She remembered seeing laughter disappear little by little. She remembered greeting them each morning, only to receive a weak smile that never reached their eyes. She often prayed quietly from her front porch, asking me to surround that home with peace. She never imagined those prayers would one day become part of a much greater answer. Yet I hear every whispered prayer. Even the one spoken without expectation. The woman reached into her cloth bag and carefully removed several small notes. They were not official documents. They were simple observations she had written after seeing things that troubled her heart. She explained that she often sat beside her window while reading scripture. From there she noticed unfamiliar visitors arriving at unusual hours. She saw your soulmate refuse to let them enter the house. She saw difficult conversations happen outside beneath the porch light. More than once she watched your soulmate close the door, lean against it, and quietly cry after everyone had left. Those tears stayed in her memory. My child, she also remembered one beautiful morning that no one else knew about. The neighborhood was still asleep. Soft sunlight rested upon the sidewalks. Your soulmate stood alone beside a small flower garden holding a folded letter. They looked toward the sky and whispered your name with deep affection. Then they prayed, Lord, if loving them means waiting, give me strength to wait with honor. The elderly woman never forgot those words. She believed they were too sacred to repeat until the right moment arrived. Now that moment had come. The officer listened carefully as every detail was shared. None of the observations accused your soulmate of wrongdoing. Instead, they painted the picture of someone carrying fear while desperately trying to protect another person. The neighbor who first contacted the police slowly realized that their own testimony was only one piece of a much larger picture. Different people had witnessed different moments. Alone they seemed ordinary. Together they revealed the truth that had remained hidden for so long. You who are listening, remember this. Sometimes I answer prayers through ordinary people who quietly choose compassion. Not everyone who notices your pain will ignore it. I often prepare hearts before you even know you need them. The elderly woman never believed her small notes would matter. Yet those simple pages helped remove suspicion and replace it with understanding. Kindness often works in silence before it is finally seen. As the conversation continued, the officer asked whether anyone had ever threatened your soulmate directly. The woman nodded slowly. She explained that one evening she heard raised voices while watering her flowers. She could not hear every word. But she clearly heard one sentence spoken by an unfamiliar voice. If you tell anyone, they will suffer too. She immediately looked toward your soulmate's home. She saw fear on their face unlike anything she had ever witnessed before. From that day forward she prayed even more faithfully. My beloved child, fear can silence a person for a season, but it cannot silence truth forever. I was already preparing the right time for hidden things to come into the light. Every prayer, every witness, every quiet act of courage was becoming part of my unseen work. Even while you wondered why nothing seemed to change, I was carefully arranging moments that would eventually lead toward healing instead of despair. The officer placed the notebook, the letter, and the witness statements together on the table. Then something unexpected happened. Your soulmate asked for a blank sheet of paper. No one understood why. With calm hands they began writing another letter. This one was different. It was not filled with fear. It was filled with honesty. They wrote about regret without hiding it. They wrote about hope without forcing it. Most of all, they wrote that if another chance ever came, they would never allow silence to speak louder than love again. The room felt lighter. Even the air seemed different. The elderly woman smiled through tears. The neighbor quietly thanked God for giving them courage to act when it mattered most. The officer closed the folder with gentle care. They knew this case had become about far more than facts. It had become about truth restoring what fear had nearly destroyed. My child, your soulmate still has one conversation ahead that they have imagined hundreds of times. They have practiced the words in empty rooms. They have whispered them during late-night prayers. They have repeated them while staring at your photograph. Yet they still wonder whether those words will ever reach your heart. I know every sentence they long to say. I also know the perfect moment for those words to be spoken. Before everyone prepared to leave, the elderly woman remembered one final detail. She reached into her cloth bag once more and removed a tiny silver key she had found near your soulmate's mailbox weeks earlier. She had kept it safe, believing someone would eventually ask about it. When your soulmate saw the key, all color left their face. They immediately recognized where it belonged. Behind that locked door rested one final truth that no witness had seen, and it would explain why your name had been protected from the very beginning. That my child, listen carefully. The moment your soulmate saw the small silver key, every memory they had tried to bury came rushing back. They closed their eyes for a brief moment. Their breathing slowed. No one in the room spoke. The officer noticed the change on their face and gently asked, "Do you know where this belongs?" Your soulmate nodded without lifting their head. "Yes," they answered quietly. "It opens the old storage room behind my house." The words were simple, yet they carried years of hidden weight. The elderly woman held the key with trembling fingers before placing it into your soulmate's hand. She had protected it without knowing why. Now its purpose was finally becoming clear. My beloved child, that storage room had remained locked for many months. Dust covered the small window. Fallen leaves gathered against the old wooden door. Most neighbors believed it held forgotten furniture and broken boxes. No one imagined that it also held pieces of a painful season your soulmate had never found the strength to face again. As everyone arrived outside, a gentle breeze moved through the trees. The afternoon sun rested softly over the quiet neighborhood. Even the birds seemed unusually still, as though creation itself was waiting for truth to enter the light. Your soulmate walked slowly toward the weathered door. Each step felt heavier than the last. The officer remained a respectful distance behind. The neighbor stood silently beside the elderly woman. No one wanted to rush this moment. Healing cannot be forced. It must be allowed to unfold with patience. Your soulmate placed the key into the old lock. Their hand shook for a second before turning it. A soft click echoed through the still air. The door slowly opened. Inside, everything looked untouched. Dust floated through thin beams of sunlight. A wooden chair rested near the wall. A faded blanket covered several stacked boxes. An old lantern sat upon a shelf beside a family Bible. Nothing appeared dangerous. Nothing seemed unusual. Yet your soulmate quietly whispered, "It isn't what you see. It's what these things remind me of." Those words revealed that the deepest prison had never been inside the room. It had lived inside their heart. "My child," your soulmate walked toward a small wooden chest resting beneath the window. They knelt beside it with tears filling their eyes. Slowly they lifted the lid. Inside were photographs, handwritten prayers, church bulletins, and carefully folded letters. Every item told the same story. They had been preparing themselves to return to truth long before anyone realized it. The officer gently examined the contents. Nothing inside pointed toward guilt. Instead, every page reflected someone struggling to hold on to faith while carrying fear they believed no one else could understand. One photograph immediately caught everyone's attention. It showed your soulmate standing outside a little country church years earlier. They were smiling freely. Hope filled their face. On the back of the picture, written in simple handwriting, were the words, "Lord, if it is your will, protect the one you are preparing for me." Your soulmate looked down and quietly admitted, "I wrote that prayer long before I ever met them." The neighbor's eyes filled with tears. They realized your name had never been an accident in your soulmate's life. It had been part of countless private prayers offered long before your paths crossed. You who are listening, never underestimate the prayers spoken in hidden places. Many answers begin long before you recognize them. I often prepare hearts years before they finally meet. What seems sudden to you has usually been growing quietly beneath the surface. That is why trust is so important. I see beginnings long before you do. I also see endings filled with hope when you can only see today's uncertainty. As the officer continued looking through the chest, another envelope appeared beneath the photographs. Unlike the earlier letter, this one remained sealed. Across the front, only 2 words had been written. If found. Your soulmate stared at it without moving. They had almost forgotten it existed. They gently broke the seal and unfolded the pages. The handwriting was unmistakably their own. It had been written during one of the darkest nights of their life. Yet the ending of the letter surprised even them. Instead of giving up, they had written a promise. When fear no longer rules me, I will choose honesty, no matter what it costs. My beloved child, sometimes people make promises to me long before they are strong enough to fulfill them. I do not despise those promises. I patiently help them grow into them. Your soulmate had failed many times. They had almost spoken the truth, then stepped back in fear. They had almost reached out to you, then erased the message. But every failure became another lesson leading toward courage. Grace was never absent. It was quietly teaching them to stand again after every stumble. The officer folded the letter carefully and returned it to your soulmate. This belongs with you, they said. Not as evidence, but as a reminder. Those words touched something deep inside your soulmate. For the first time in many months, they felt lighter. They no longer believed their past would always define their future. They understood that truth had begun replacing shame. Peace had quietly entered the places where fear once lived. The elderly woman smiled gently and looked toward the open sky. I prayed for this day, she whispered. The neighbor nodded in agreement. None of them claimed credit. They all recognized that courage had grown little by little through ordinary moments, quiet prayers, and faithful choices. Your soulmate closed the wooden chest and carried it outside. They no longer wanted hidden things to remain hidden. They were ready to begin living in the light. My child, one important question still remained. Why had the threat suddenly stopped only days before the neighbor spoke with the police? Your soulmate believed it was only coincidence. The officer believed someone had changed their mind. But I knew there was another reason entirely. Before anyone left the property, a patrol officer quietly approached with new information from a nearby security camera. The footage showed someone standing outside your soulmate's home on the very night everything began to change. When your soulmate recognized the familiar face on the screen, they whispered, "Now I finally understand who was protecting us when I could not see it." My child, listen carefully. When your soulmate recognized the face on the security footage, they did not react with fear. They reacted with relief. It was someone who had quietly chosen to watch over the neighborhood after noticing that something was wrong. Without seeking attention or praise, that person had remained nearby on several difficult nights, ready to call for help if danger appeared again. Your soulmate realized they had never been as alone as they believed. I had been placing caring people around them long before they understood my quiet protection. My beloved child, this is what I want your heart to remember today. Fear can make the future look dark, but fear does not have the final word. Truth does. Grace does. My love does. The confession made by the neighbor did not destroy your soulmate's life. It became the first step toward healing. The witness who spoke did not act out of anger. They acted out of compassion. The police did not uncover a guilty heart. They uncovered a heart that had been carrying too much alone. Your soulmate stood outside their home one final time before everyone left. The evening sun covered the street with warm golden light. The wind moved gently through the trees. They held the old photograph in one hand and the worn Bible in the other. Quietly they prayed, "Lord, thank you for not giving up on me when I almost gave up on myself." That prayer was simple. It was honest. And I heard every word. You who are listening, perhaps you have also misunderstood someone's silence. Perhaps someone has misunderstood yours. Do not allow fear to become stronger than truth. Pray instead of worrying. Trust my timing. I am already working where you cannot yet see. Healing often begins with one honest conversation, one courageous decision, and one heart willing to forgive. Your soulmate is no longer the person who hid behind fear. They have learned that love grows stronger in the light than it ever can in secrecy. They are choosing honesty over hiding, faith over panic, and hope over despair. Their heart has changed because I have been patiently shaping it through every difficult season. My child, if this message has brought peace to your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. There are many people carrying silent burdens, believing no one sees them. Remind them that I see every tear, every prayer, and every quiet act of courage. None of it is forgotten. As this moment comes to a close, leave your heart in my hands instead of placing it in fear. Keep walking with faith. Keep choosing grace. Keep trusting that I am guiding both your life and your soulmate's life with wisdom beyond what you can presently understand. I have never stopped working for your good. I have never stopped calling both of you toward truth, healing, and peace. If this message encouraged your heart, type Amen. Then go forward in faith, knowing that my light is always greater than the darkness, and my perfect timing never fails.